I don't know, almost like a publicity type of ploy, as opposed to like, hey, this is actually what's going on, and maybe more so just to start conversation between Vitalik and Solana, and also put more pressure on Ethereum, right? Like, I think one of the biggest things with Ethereum is, when are the gas fees going to be lowered, and when's transaction time actually going to be better, right? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wagmi TV. Very important episode for you guys today. We are hearing rumors that MakerDao may migrate their operations from the Ethereum blockchain over to Solana. So we definitely want to dive into what we've heard so far, a little bit of the background, and what you guys need to know. So to get us kicked off, I'm going to send it over to Mata. Give us a little background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big news that we all saw is that Ethereum's co-founder Vitalik Buterin, he sold around $580,000 worth of MakerDAO's Maker tokens. Obviously, as Sia kind of alluded to here, that comes after MakerDAO's CEO Rune Christensen actually advocated for launching the project's new chain on Solana. So obviously, Vitalik, in the article that we were reading, he expresses dissatisfaction with the decision, saying it'd be torpedoing itself in weird directions. So I guess I wanted to get both of your takes on just that in general, kind of the news that obviously broke out with MakerDAO. Obviously, they've been very connected with Ethereum up until this point, and then kind of the reaction that Vitalik had after that. Do you see any kind of connections there?
Yeah, I mean, just to provide a little bit more context on the whole situation, a few months ago, Rune had laid out this plan, which was dubbed, I guess, quote unquote, the end game, which is really supposed to be a pretty much top to bottom overhaul of, the entire MakerDAO project and setting it up for, future success. And so really what this, is like, all of this is about phase 5, which is the last phase of this end game scenario that he had laid out. So I do want to just share one thing that might, provide some additional context here on why this is actually making a lot of noise within the, DeFi space specifically. So if you look here, this is, the forum post where Rune lays out the 5 phases of the end game, as you can see, and we'll have this linked in the description below for folks to check out. Here is where it gets interesting. Keep in mind, this is published in May of this year, so just a few months ago. It says here, the ecosystem focus of MakerDAO and subDAOs will continue to be the Ethereum ecosystem and Ethereum L2s, as well as any alternative L1s that have sufficient markets and user bases. So here, when he had originally written this, it makes it very clear that MakerDAO, which has been and continues to be one of the most successful, one of the most bedrock projects, I guess you could say, of Ethereum and of DeFi in general. It makes it very clear here that the plan is to stay within the Ethereum ecosystem and possibly expand to Alt L1s. Now, the news that we're getting here this week is that instead of, remaining a bedrock within the Ethereum ecosystem, the plan actually might be to move and migrate ecosystems entirely to the Solana ecosystem. So that's really, I think, what has driven this, more in the news. What obviously set off alarm bells in Vitalik's mind. Because if it was just a question of expanding to a new ecosystem, I don't think it really would have, ruffled that many feathers. I think the idea of migrating entirely is what, has people reacting the way they are.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair assessment. That's kind of how that's how the headlines and the articles are all coming across, even when you read through them. Basically saying like all of MakerDAO from now moving forward is going to be moved to Solana off of Ethereum. But you'd think, like to your point, so you'd think if that's going to really be the case, like how could they make that big of a decision between the time that forum was posted in May and now? The more that we've done research into this, the more that it seems almost like almost like a publicity type of ploy, as opposed to like, hey, this is actually what's going on, and maybe more so just to start conversation between Vitalik and Solana, and also put more pressure on Ethereum, right? Like I think one of the biggest things with Ethereum is when are the gas fees going to be lowered, and when's transaction time actually going to be better, right? Because obviously Solana is always the one gunning for Ethereum, and I think that this kind of put a little chum in the water, so to speak. And so, I think, at least from my perspective right now, based on what we've read through, it looks more like it's kind of an optics ploy and not necessarily the total truth of what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? I mean, they're still going to have to, it's still contingent on community approval from the MakerDao ecosystem, right? I do wonder to that point if, Rune Christensen and Vitalik had ever had any conversations about this. Obviously, it's been pretty bedrock in Ethereum up until this point. Like Soham mentioned, it really was supposed to just be expansion, not necessarily a full migration, which it sounds like is what's going to kind of be conjured up here. I guess the reaction is really interesting, right? With Vitalik, is he selling this because of his disapproval of, the project's new direction? Is he just trying to, take some of his profits off the table and diversify his portfolio? I think that those are two of the questions that you have to ask when it comes to this, because if Vitalik's making those moves because of his disapproval of that direction, I think that could speak volumes and probably will be, reflected in kind of that community vote and the proposal that they have there. To your points, yeah, I think it is really interesting. I was reading another article where they actually had a chat with Solana's co-founder Anatoly Yakovenko, and he actually defended Ethereum amid some of these considerations from MakerDao forking its blockchain onto Solana, basically saying that ETH's still the leading blockchain for DeFi. Solana's not yet ready to replace it, and kind of just saying, I don't really know what they're doing. So I really thought that was an interesting thing coming from a co-founder of Solana who they obviously are two competing people in the L1 market at this point. Someone's coming over to your chain because they believe in you, and to come out and say that, I thought that was really interesting. Any thoughts on that, or do you think that other projects, chains, etc., are thinking about launching on Solana versus Ethereum, and if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, it is very interesting because part of this end game scenario that Rune details right at the top is taking the circulating supply of DAI and growing it to 100 billion in over the course of 3 years. Now, in order for that to happen, you can see how retail adoption has to take place for that number to get hit, because that's just what that lofty goal requires, right? And you can see how the frustration probably within the Ethereum ecosystem of the lack of the lack of the ability for a normal average Joe to be able to use that chain in any sort of respectable fashion. And so I think that probably has a lot to do with it. The other thing is like, I have heard of some, RWA, like real world asset projects launching and being successful on Solana as well. And with MakerDao now moving more and more into, the realm of backing DAI with real world assets, I think that may have potentially impacted this a little bit. But I still don't see it like really moving the needle on it. It has to be some sort of play for retail adoption for this really to make any sense. That's my general feeling.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would also say like there could be a longer game to this, like as we kind of see institutions picking up crypto a little bit more, being more interested in crypto, allowing the more like regulation to come in. I think we're going to see some more in the next 5 years or so. And I think one of the biggest concerns around Solana is always one, the uptime, to the security. So I think Ethereum's best play is to like harp on those and hope that obviously institutions are going to be more kind of focused on, okay, what kind of security can you provide as opposed to transaction times. They're going to want both, but I think having the security first is definitely a pro there. But to your point, Zoe, for this, I mean, I feel like Solana is more of, at least at this point, more of like that retail play that you're talking about, as opposed to like institutional players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like you guys mentioned that this does have to pass a community vote, and the reality of the situation is that like MakerDAO's base is, for all intents and purposes, like very Ethereum aligned. Like as I mentioned before, they were one of the first and most successful DeFi projects on Ethereum. They're obviously like governed as a DAO, and they're very open source, and so I have a hard time believing that this would pass a vote within their community without something like special happening. So I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see, but that's my prediction right now. Is I don't think this would get past their DAO structure.
Yeah, I think Sia kind of nailed it on the head there, where it might be a little bit of a publicity stunt, kind of get in retail's head a little bit. It is kind of some free publicity for Solana in general, right? Which is super exciting. I think in general, we always talk about how competition is healthy for the market, especially for DeFi, right? We don't want it to just be Ethereum. We want Ethereum to continue to bolster and continue to be better and better. And the only way to do that is to introduce new competitors along the way. So if it does end up being Ethereum in the end, at least they're the best Ethereum that we could ever get, right? So it is interesting regardless. Definitely some interesting news and a wild reaction, I would say, from Vitalik. So we'll see what happens and if the community kind of takes that into consideration when they're going into the voting process.
Yeah, I think these are all great points, and obviously we're going to keep you guys up to date on what's going on and how the endgame process goes for MakerDao to see where that lands. But as always, if you guys found this valuable, like, comment, subscribe. We always love getting to know more about your thoughts in the comments, so definitely keep those coming. And we'll see you next week on Wagmi.